Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome to my podcast, Spiritual Talk with Christy Godwin and Friends. I'm your resident psychic medium, Christy Godwin, and I am here with Marie McGovern. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me again, Christy.
So now, if you've been following along, this is part 3 of Marie's story, and her stepdad was Don Studey. And we have been really talking about what it was like to live with such a violent person and the effects it has not only on the immediate family, but how it just has tentacles that goes out to generations on. And for those of you who don't know, Don Studey is someone who is being investigated. He was from Iowa, as now they think he might be a serial killer. At the time you knew him, he was just a horrifically mean person.
Yes.
And so I do want to give a trigger warning for anyone listening to this. We're really going to take this on the spin of domestic violence today. And so if you are triggered by that talk or any statistics we may throw at you, just know that that's what this podcast is going to be about. I do also want to tell anyone that is experiencing domestic violence, there is a hotline. Please use it. It is 800-799-7233. That will be in the verbiage of this podcast. You can also text the word START, S-T-A-R-T, to the number 88788. Again, that will be in the verbiage of this podcast. Please make use of the resources available to you if you are experiencing domestic violence in any way, shape, or form. Okay, so now we are going to talk a little bit about, we're taking a little bit different spin on this. I was telling Marie this morning that her mom had me going down a rabbit hole. And Marie said the same. Now her mom is in spirit.
Yes.
But, not only can I, as a psychic medium, get information from past relatives, Marie, you get signs and intuitive hits from your mother also, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Now,
yes.
I know that's not what I'm about to ask you is not what this podcast is about, but I do want to speak on that for just a moment. How do you know when you're getting a hit? How do you know it's your mom? How do you know it's her giving you an intuition or a sign?
It's usually a very strong feeling, and she will bring me like signs of things that I know it's only something that was between like her and I. My gift is my intuition is truly just a knowing. Things just come in and I just know it in my soul. So she'll send me like flowers. She loved roses. So if I keep getting roses, I know it's her. She loved like gardening. So if I get a lot of gardening posts, I know she's coming.
Yes. Yes.
It's a lot of that type of thing with her.
And that is exactly the way I see it. That is it for anyone watching or listening. That's the way it happens. Claircognizant is what Marie was discussing when she says, I just know. That's called claircognizance, clear knowing. And if you have whatever your spirit was into, if it was music, they're going to mess with your music. If it was gardening, they're going to, send you a lot of things, or all of a sudden you're going to notice you're getting all these gardening posts, or people are talking about gardening a lot. And it's saying, hey, I'm here. If they were, they loved horses or animals, you're going to start getting a lot of that kind of information. And just know that it is your loved ones. They love us. And even if they passed and you were in an argument, which I know you and your mom weren't, but I do like to always say that because people were saying, oh my goodness, they will feel this guilt over their loved one passing and they had just had an argument. They don't care. They're in heaven.
Nope, they don't.
Water under the bridge. Okay. So now we're going to get into the enormity of the problem of domestic violence. And there is no way we can cover all of it in this one podcast, but we're just going to scratch the surface. And I want people to think about this for a moment. Nearly 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner. 20 people per minute are abused by a physical partner. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men experience severe intimate partner physical violence. Now, when we're talking severe, we're talking, injury, burning, those type of almost torturous type. 1 in 3, now that was 1 in 4, a quarter of the women. But yeah, 1 in 9 for men. I don't want to leave the men out, though we are really going to focus on women here. 1 in 3 women have experienced some form of physical violence, maybe not as huge as the 1 in 4, but some form. 1 in 7 women have been injured by an intimate partner. I mean, I could go on and on. I'm not going to bore you all with all the stats of it, but I do want to talk about the enormity of it happening. And when I say women, I mean different age ranges. I don't have the stats of kids in here because this is not about child abuse. But when we start talking intimate partners, it doesn't just have to be women who are married. It doesn't have to be women who are in their 20s.
No.
I know young ladies who I have coached that have experienced domestic violence. And so I want to speak a little bit about not just the problem it is for older women, but young girls.
Yes.
Young girls who are, in high school and they're just starting out and they don't really know what love is yet.
Correct.
And I know, Marie, you did say you were married to your high school sweetheart, but it does work out sometimes. But, sometimes young ladies get a skewed view of what love really is.
Yes.
I know that sometimes whenever you think your partner is trying to control you, I see it a lot. The control factor is huge when I see younger, because they're immature and they don't understand that you can't control someone.
Yes.
So girls will start just hanging out with their boyfriend all the time, doing what he says. Oh, but he must love me. He wants to be with me all the time. While he's going out with his friends. Oh, he just loves me. He wants me to be safe. So I'm staying home.
No.
No.
He's isolating you.
Exactly. He's isolating you and making sure he doesn't have any competition, and you're not talking to your friends about how he's treating you.
Correct.
And then it's even further. I know I was, even as an adult, was talking with some girlfriends of mine, and one of my friends, I mean, she was married to someone else at this point, was talking about how her boyfriend in high school, and she didn't think anything about it, like would pinch her arm and like drag her by her arm, and because it wasn't something that was leaving marks, because it wasn't something that was really hurting her. She didn't understand the impact of it until she got older.
Yes.
But now, before we get on this podcast, I love the way you put this, Marie. I don't know if you remember what you were saying. If in a relationship, can you remember what that was?
No, I don't.
She was saying if in a relationship you're not feeling loved and they're not bringing you joy, then it's not the relationship for you.
Yes, if there is no joy. Yep.
Now, Marie and I have both been married a long time, and we're not about to sit here to tell you that every day is rainbows and butterflies. We will not say that. But there is a difference between, I did a TikTok just the other day. I was really talking about how relationships don't end because of a lack of love. They end because of a lack of respect.
Yes.
You cannot love someone into behaving the way you need them to behave. Now, Marie, have you seen that with some of your friends who you're just like, sometimes you're like, oh my goodness, they're not going to change. They're not going to change.
Yes, I had some friends that it's like, it's a breakup, then they're back, then they're breakup, then they're back, and I'm like, okay, after about 4 or 5 times, have you not figured this out?
No, it's true. It is absolutely true. They're not going to change. You may want them to change. You want it.
Yeah, it is a thing. But it's like, if a relationship is so hard and it's so much work, then it's not really a good fit. Love shouldn't be hard.
Right. Absolutely. And whenever your partner keeps saying they're going to change, and then they change for a couple of weeks. And I love Maya Angelou, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. And do I think people can change? Do I think they can? Yes, I do.
Mhm.
But when you've given them a chance and then they don't, they're not going to. And
Um, yeah, I think the difference is that when you're in a relationship, if there is something that needs to change, that person needs to change for themselves, not for you. And if they're changing for themselves, then it will happen. If they're changing for you, it will never, because then there's no respect and there's going to be resentment and it's not a good fit. They have to know truly for themselves.
absolutely. Absolutely. That is so true. We talk, my husband and I both do hypnotherapy, and we talk a lot about that hypnotherapy only works if you want it to. If you
Mhm.
come to me or my husband to lose weight or stop smoking or whatever it is through hypnotherapy, it's only going to work if you want it, not because your partner told you to come to us. So, and I want to talk back also to your mom. You had walked in one day on her. Now, this was the time that you said you walked in on her, and your stepdad was basically had her pinned down
Mhm.
and was just, this is pretty graphic for anyone listening, just was pounding her face.
Mhm.
And you stepped in,
Yep.
and at that point, your mom went to the hospital.
Yes.
Now, as a child, how old were you when this happened?
I still think I was only like 13. I might have been close to 14. I think I was only like 13. So I was
And
pretty young.
what I think is beautiful and amazing is that you were able to go on and make a healthy choice in a relationship.
Yes. I
Because
sometimes
I see that so much is that people, because that's what they grow up with and that's what they consider love, that's what they've seen, and that's what they think they're worthy of, that's what they go on to choose.
yes.
And even though they wouldn't think they were going to choose that, it's comfortable because it's what they know.
I do truly feel though I did have some really kind and loving relatives. I had a really kind and loving grandmother. I had, aunts and uncles that were kind and cousins. And I think that I was able to see what true kindness and love was, not
Yes,
just in my household.
yes. That does make a difference when you can look outside of your household and see something.
Mhm.
But I do want Marie to, I still am going to love on her a little bit and talk about still how proud I am of her for doing that, because the statistics say it doesn't, it's your immediate household that's going to dictate the relationship that you choose. So the amount of strength it took her to look for something better
Mhm.
is, not to be snuffed. That did
No.
take a lot of strength. Now, you had this household had other children in it.
Yes, I did.
Now, did they go on to get into abusive relationships? We're not going to name them because we're not going to call them out on here.
Um, I think the majority of them did.
Hmm. And that's where you see the issues become, it's not just isolated to
Mm-mm.
that generation.
No.
Then you said the majority of the children in that household went on to then go into
Mhm.
domestic violence relationships. And then their children, that's what they've seen. And, that's horrible to think because no one wants our children to be in that situation. But if that's what you're modeling for them,
Yes.
that's what's going to happen.
Mhm.
And let's talk about, I want to break down some forms of domestic abuse, because I know a lot of people think that domestic abuse is just about, like I just talked about, the horrific hitting
Mhm.
and beating that your stepdad would do to your mom. Yes, absolutely, that's a form of it. But there's also economic
Yes.
abuse. And heaven forbid you involve some kind of weapons. There's weapons, and of course, there's
Right.
physical. There's emotional and psychological abuse. Now, did you notice that with your mom and stepdad?
Yes, he just had a way of like spinning words and
Mhm.
talking to you and like making you feel like you did something wrong. When I was
Oh,
like, but I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't, or I didn't really say it that way, or you know what I mean?
oh yeah,
Uh,
classic narcissist
yes,
behavior right there.
yeah,
Classic.
he could play with your mind and just make you feel like you were less than you were.
And you know what? That is almost, I wouldn't say worse than the physical abuse, but it's just as bad, if not worse, because it erodes at someone's self esteem and who they are at a soul level. And so it robs them of their ability then to be able to stand up for themselves and leave that relationship because it's eroding at who they are.
Well, it takes away your discernment.
Yes, absolutely. And then there's, of course, domestic violence and sexual assault. A lot of, I know that you wouldn't be privy to that with your stepdad and mom, but it is definitely a huge component of when the partner feels like they just own their spouse, or even if they're in a relationship, they don't have to be married.
Mhm,
They just feel
exactly.
like they own. And also, there is stalking involved whenever you do leave and you become, that is very scary when people are stalked.
Yes, that is a whole nother level of mental.
Right, whole nother level of mental because you're always looking over your shoulder.
Mhm.
Then there is domestic violence in pets. I know that people have, used people's pets against them, even killed their pets to get
Yes.
control. Now, you never mentioned that with your stepdad. Did he ever do any of that?
When we were living with him at the time, I don't believe we had any pets at that time. We did have pets before where, we always had dogs and cats. But at the time he was in our lives, we didn't have any animals at that time.
Okay.
My mom, after we moved out, um, and they moved in together, she had gotten 2 ferrets. So she did have a couple animals and she loved those ferrets. And it just still to this day cracks me up that she would pick ferrets.
I know. I was gonna say that actually came up in the first reading that we had, which
Mhm.
we'll probably get to a little bit later. But now, I do want to also pull out a statistic that people underestimate the impact of economic abuse can have. 94 to 99% of domestic violence survivors have experienced economic abuse. Because when we take away someone's power to make money,
Mhm.
and you don't have resources that you don't have a family that can give you money, and some people are, they're too proud to ask for money, then
Mhm.
you are stuck.
Mhm.
People say money doesn't buy love, but let me tell you, it can sure help get you out of bad situations sometimes.
Yes.
And we're not
It's just,
talking huge money, we're talking whenever. And I was just talking to a friend of mine, and she's in the process of leaving her husband. They had not been married very long. And she didn't even realize it, but she said that right before she left, he had, instead of having the money deposited into a joint account, then he had taken it and started putting it into his own account where she wasn't on it. And she was a stay at home mom.
oh.
And right, she's young. And I instantly pointed out to her, you do realize he was going down the road of financial, economic abuse. And she's like, what?
Mhm.
And when I pointed it out to her and told her, she had not even realized because she was in the process, like a lot of other things had happened. So she was in the process of getting out. So it hadn't had the huge impact. But let me tell you, when she went to leave him, um, she did have to start asking other people for money because he wouldn't give her enough.
Yeah.
And thankfully, she had the resources to do so.
Mhm. Yes.
And that was just, and sometimes that's the way it begins. Now, had he been physically abusive? Not yet. Would he
But
have
see the
been?
mental and the control, it all leads up. It's because it
Mhm.
takes your discernment and your common sense away.
It really does. And looking back on that relationship, he had already kind of isolated her. And then, that was step one, the isolation.
Mhm.
Step two. And then she got out. She had not realized that these were the steps going on,
Yes.
because you don't.
You don't.
You
And
don't
that's
realize, especially for some of the stay-at-home moms, a lot of women want to do that. They want to be home with their kids, which I admire. Yes, do it if you can. And so your partner makes it look, stay home. I'll take care of you. I'll take care of you. I'll take care of you. So, okay, I'm going to stay home. And
mhm.
then, start getting isolated. Well, you can't go out with your friends. You can't do this. You can't do that. And then it just progresses.
Yep, because then you just rely on them.
Absolutely, you do.
Mhm.
Now, when we talk about also domestic violence, it's not just about the physical of it. Why don't women leave? You're and again, I remember growing up when I was young and I was working in a restaurant. This gal she came every day, and this was me being young and immature. I get it, I was wrong.
Mhm.
But she would come every day to work, and she was just like bruises all over her.
Mm.
I didn't even know what it was, like what's going on. And then one time she came with bruises on her face. And I asked her what happened. I can still remember, it was a Mexican restaurant in my hometown where I had worked. And I can't remember what she said now, but it was silly. Like she'd fallen downstairs or ran into a door, that classic story. And and I took it at face value. And I went to walk away and I turned around. All of a sudden it hit me and said, that is not what happened. And and then I was like, why don't you just leave? Just leave, just leave. And so in my immature 20-year-old brain,
Mhm.
just leave. What's the big deal? I know Maria's laughing like, yeah, we've all been there. And it's not that easy. We would
Not if
love,
she's at that level. He's probably gotten her mentally beat down.
yes. And now I want to go back to first, let's do this quick. I looked down at my notes. I want to mention something. Um, Almost 3 women are killed by an intimate partner every day.
Wow, that's a lot.
I know it is. Can you imagine? Now, we talked about the statistics of just the violence in general, um, but 3 women are killed every day by an intimate partner. And I remembered this case and I looked it up. It was this lady, and it was here recently. It was this lady in New York, and she was gunned down senselessly, they thought, while she was out walking her 3-month-old. I'm gonna butcher her name. It was Azia, Azizia Johnson. And New Yorkers were up in arms, rightly so. This young mom out with her 3-month baby just gunned down. Well, no, no, no. A week later, her partner was, ex-partner was
Mhm.
arrested for her murder.
Wow.
And then it came out she had been physically abused during her entire pregnancy. And then when she chose to leave him, he had started stalking her.
Oh, wow.
And that's how it escalates. And so when people are afraid to leave a domestic violence situation, when it has gotten to the point where I was talking with this lady I worked with, when it had gotten to the point of where your mom was, there is legitimate reason to be concerned.
Yes, there is.
And so the young 20 silly year old I was just leave, just leave. What's the big deal? Not understanding the implications of what that does. And I want
Mhm.
to go back to and I had, I was reading you and your mom had stepped up and we were talking about, and of course I was choosing my words very gently because Marie and I was just reading her, we didn't have the relationship we have now. And it's like your mom, and I told you this, I said, your mom was afraid, like he had threatened her.
Yes, she was very terrified of him.
And now I just want to disclose right now, your mom was said to have taken her own life, committed suicide when you were
Yeah.
there.
Mhm.
But
Yes.
now the first time you came to me for reading, well, that's in another podcast. If you want to go back, I'll do a quick synopsis here. I had said, that's not what I'm seeing. And you said another medium had told you the same thing.
Correct.
And so then another time in another podcast, which came out, didn't even come out in the original reading, as I said, I could see someone, like I said, your mom had said, if it had been researched, it would have been shown that there's no way she could have taken her own life because her arm was not long enough to reach the rifle and shoot herself. And then you said, how did you know it was a rifle? I said, because your mom is showing me. Your mom is and you said, but I never told you that. And so that's the way when you're doing readings, how information comes through authentically. And you said the police had said it was a rifle.
Mhm. Yes.
And so, and then I came up to, I said, your mom had known, I mean, he had threatened her.
Mhm.
She was very, very afraid. And then something that popped into my head earlier this morning as I was preparing for this podcast is you said that the last time you saw your mom, you could see the fear in her eyes.
Yes. She was like, it was just sad. My mom was always full of life, but that last meeting before she passed, she just looked broken. She looked terrified. She just looked like she was lost. She didn't know what to do. And it was almost like she was telling me goodbye.
Yes. And as I tap into that moment, some of the feelings I feel off of her are fear.
Mhm.
And not just a snake, I'm afraid, but that soul wrenching, helpless fear.
Mhm. But I can understand it because the last fight that I broke up with her and Don, the look in his eyes it was pure evil, and it shook me. It truly shook me. And I knew it was not going to end well.
Mm-hmm. And she knew that no one was going to help her.
Mhm.
Like she had been in the hospital from
The
how
last
badly he
meeting,
had
yeah,
hurt
last
last
meeting,
time.
she was in the hospital for over a week.
Mm-hmm. And nothing. I mean, you said he spent a night in jail or something?
I thought he'd spend some time because they did take him away. And that's why I thought, great, she'll press charges this time. And within a day or two, I think he was out because I don't think she pressed charges.
And before anyone judges that, I want people to think about the man that has the kind of rage that Don did, which a lot of domestic violence
Mhm.
people that do that have that kind of rage. Okay, so there is no way over beating a woman, he is going to be put into prison permanently, right?
Correct.
At some point, he's going to get out.
Yep.
Now, if she presses charges, how angry would he have been?
Oh, definitely. He's going to sit in there and stew.
Absolutely. So she knew, I knew a lot of women I know don't press charges because of, and I've talked to them because of that, the fear.
Yep.
The men just go to jail. There's no rehab for them. There's no counseling, and they just go and do their time, whether it's 3 months or 3 years. They stew.
Mhm.
And when they get out, who are they
Watch
going to be
out.
looking for? Right. And so that is why. So people start judging, why didn't she press charges? That is why these women are brainwashed, and there's no one to save them in that moment of, because they can be found. I mean, you can't be watched all the time.
Right. But he had also threatened her parents.
Yes.
So he was threatening other family members of hers. And so that's why my older sister begged her to leave him. And she wouldn't do it. And it was truly, she was terrified of something. I don't know what he threatened her with, but she was very terrified of him.
And that came up in one of the readings I said, when we're talking about it, and I just popped up and said he had threatened your mom's family, and then you confirmed, yes, he had,
Mhm.
which domestic violence people do. Also, I'm feeling, because now as a medium, I know that the police have said that she had taken her own life. As a medium, I said, you know, that was kind of impossible. That's what she's saying. And you said, yes, it was a rifle. And but I was feeling her being a little bit incapacitated at the time of her passing, like she had drank a lot or something like that. And I do feel him. And I said, you know, she had seen him. What did she go back to this house for? Because she, now when she took her own life, it was, you said it was at her apartment in her car,
That's what we were told.
which I think is, we're not going to get into that, but you can tell from the look on my face.
Yeah.
You know, and why? Why in your car? You're right outside your apartment. Why not in the, you know, there's just too many. But anyway, I felt that she had seen him. I was like, why on earth would she go back to that house to see him? Because I feel like on the day of her passing, she had seen him. There's absolutely no proof of this that I am aware of. I just knew she had seen him on the day of her passing. And I can feel her being very wanting to go, but not wanting to go. And I asked Marie, I said, he had something that she was willing to risk everything for. I said, but I don't feel like it was money or anything. And then what did you say it was?
I said she probably went back for her ferrets.
Her ferrets. Now, any of us who, I know a lot of people aren't into ferrets, but think about your dog. A lot of people are into dogs or cats. Now, if he had threatened, now you have to think about this. If someone has my dog, because, you know, I'm all about my dogs. If someone is threatening, you come get this dog now or I'm going to kill him. And I know that person is capable of doing that. I'm going to go get my dog.
Yes.
And so I feel like that's how he got her back into his grasp again.
Yes, because when I went and visited her at her apartment, the ferrets were not there.
Mm-hmm. You know, that would get anyone back.
But that's why when you mentioned her actually going back, that was the immediate, I was like, she went back for her ferrets.
Yes. And I knew she had gone back for something that she just absolutely loved and, you know, just couldn't imagine living without. But it wasn't money or clothes or any of that. I couldn't imagine what it was. And you said, oh, her ferrets. I said, oh, yep. It was. And I would not have been able to get ferret anyway because I'm not a ferret person, but
they're silly little things and they used to just make her laugh. She absolutely loved them.
Oh my goodness. It was like her one joy, the things that gave her joy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, also, I want to talk a little bit about Don has been accused of being a serial killer.
Mm-hmm. And
you were over here at the house the other day and we were working on a timeline and coming up with some names of some potential victims and just how it fits into place. And it was funny to see Marie kind of going through the cobwebs because I was naming, I said, now I'm seeing there was a bar he frequented. I'm seeing, and I can see her sit back and she's like, yeah, there was. And so that's what kind of happens when you work with a psychic medium is they will give you some of those things of, think about this. This is what I'm seeing. What does that mean? It kind of unsticks some of those cobwebby memories.
Yes.
And we did come up with some names of potential victims. But now he would have been doing this during the time your mom and him were together.
Yes. When I do the math, that he had to have been doing it while they were together.
And I do want to put out there, for what it's worth, and you did ask me, I don't feel like she did not participate.
Which is,
but it heightened the fear because it's one of those situations where she knew, but she didn't know. If that makes sense. Like those where you have a huge suspicion, but even if someone is like, Marie, this happened to you. You saw how horrifically abusive he was.
Yes.
And now that this has come out, you are even like, what? How could someone do that?
Yes.
So even though, and your mom, yes, from spirit has even said that, though she knew he was capable, she just couldn't imagine someone being able to do that.
Yes.
And I do hear him saying to her, when I say hear, I don't, it's like clear audience, like in my head here, your mom's showing me, that I hear him saying, you know what I did to those other women, I'll do the same to you.
Wow.
You know what I did to those women, I can do the same to your family.
Wow.
For whatever reason, every time I feel a threatening of the family, it's her parents.
Yes, she
Um,
really did threaten my grandparents.
Okay.
The grandparents were threatened, and I
Okay.
believe they were threatened more than once.
Because every time you have mentioned him threatening the family, or even just now when I said that,
Mm.
she gave me your mom sitting here and she showed me her parents.
Yep.
She knew, didn't know, but
Mhm,
felt very strongly that he would kill her parents
mhm.
and get away with it, I'm hearing, because he'd always gotten away with everything.
She believed that he would have gotten away with it, but I truly believe that he wouldn't have,
I agree. I agree.
because my grandfather was a very big presence in our community. If something questionable happened against that man, the community would have rose.
I
And
agree.
I, but I don't believe it's, that's where I'm saying the mental abuse and everything, it takes away a person's discernment. And if she had her discernment about her, she would have known, you can't touch him. The community loves him.
Right. And I have that has come up a couple of times in things that I have, us spending time together and raveling this case and me telling you things is that, Don might have been a lot of things, but stupid he was not.
No, he was very calculated.
Yes. And so if there was a time that he felt like it was too like he I'm just confirming he wouldn't have killed your grandparents because he knew they would have come
Mhm,
after him. And
mhm.
even now, your stepsister, who witnessed a lot of this, has come forward a lot now and said, "No, I've been telling y'all he was killing women." And with the first time you said that, I said, "She almost died. He almost took her out."
Mhm.
And you said, "Yes, that she felt like she was almost taken out." I said, "But what saved her is the fact that now his daughter is coming forward saying he's killing these women, and then all of a sudden his daughter disappears. That would just
Yeah.
be too."
Yes, it would bring up all the red flags.
So he was, you're right, very calculated. He was not a dumb man.
Mm-mm.
And so, but your mom knew what he was capable of, and she was fearful.
Mhm.
Rightly
And she had
so.
the right. She had a right to
Rightly
be.
so.
Mhm.
Just, I want to go back because we can't, do. I think if they open that case, they really dug into the details of your mom's suicide. They might not be able to prove that Don did it, but I think they could prove that she didn't do it
Correct.
because Don has now passed on, and it was a long
Mhm.
time ago.
Yeah.
Um, but of women that pass, in 2018, the statistic was 92% of the victims were killed by a man they knew.
Wow.
I know we always teach our daughters stranger danger, be careful, be aware of your surroundings, which rightly so, yes.
Mhm,
But 92% of women are killed by people they know.
mhm.
63% were killed by current husbands or boyfriends or ex-husbands.
Mm.
So your mom definitely was falling into that statistic.
Yes.
And now let's talk about a little bit. We're going to talk more, I know the statistics that came, I got this from, they were talking about all kinds of different numbers and economic hits. So one that society doesn't think about, but we should, is the economic hit to just the economy in general. Victims of intimate partner violence lose a total of 8 million days of paid work each year.
Wow.
That's not just paid work for them, that's paid production of whatever they're bringing to the economy as a whole.
Mhm. Yes.
And the cost of intimate partner violence exceeds 8.3 billion per year.
Wow.
And that's when we're talking medical, economic, and all of that.
Mm.
Between 21 to 60% of victims of intimate partner violence lose their jobs due to reasons stemming from the abuse. It could be missed days, it can be lack, the partner not wanting them to go to work anymore.
Mhm.
their inability to perform at their work because they're so mentally
Yes.
drained and abused that they can no longer function and perform a job.
Well, you're always worried. I mean, you're always looking over your shoulder and you can't focus.
No, you cannot. When you are constantly worried, you cannot focus.
And if you have children involved, think about that. You're worried about your children at school. You're worried about your children at daycare. I mean,
Yes. Mentioning that, I do have a stat on that also. 1 in 15 children are exposed to intimate partner violence each year.
wow.
1 in 15 are exposed to that.
Mm.
And I venture to guess that number. My undergrad is in child development, so I have spent a lot of time working with kids. I've taught, a college classes related to children and preschoolers and that, and I would venture to say the number is a lot higher. It's just they can only report the data that they get.
Right. A lot of it's probably not even documented.
No, and so I want to think about that. They say the documented one, what was it, 8.3 billion per year is the cost of intimate partner abuse. I would say it's even higher
Mhm.
because you think about not just when you think about the generations that carry on. If you are a child that is in a domestic I mean, Marie, you really step outside what the stats say. And I know that you don't give yourself enough kudos for that, but I am.
And that's kind of why I'm stepping up and doing this. I want people to know that there is light at the end of the tunnel. And I know I didn't have it as bad as some. But the bravest thing that I did was I asked for help. I went to my sister and I went to my father and I asked for help. I stepped out of my fear of trying to protect them all from it because it was at a level I couldn't control anymore.
Yes. I want people to hear what she just said. I asked for help.
Mhm.
So, yes, are you experiencing a lot of fear when you first leave a relationship? Are you more likely to be in, danger when you're first leaving? Yes, but there are smart ways to do it.
Yes.
You ask for help.
Mhm. Yes.
You call the domestic hotline. You lean on friends. You ask for help. Now, you had those resources, and I'm so glad you did, like your sister and
Mhm.
your dad, because this was your stepdad. So you asked your biological dad for help.
Correct.
And I also want to say that is another reason why I always say Don wasn't dumb because he never really abused you because he was afraid of what your dad would do.
Yes. He knew that my father was present in my life.
Mhm. So, the more you get isolated, the more someone gets isolated and their children get isolated, the more prevalent the abuse becomes.
Mhm. Yes.
Because then you have someone who, can you imagine? I mean, look at what Don did with people looking at him and with people telling on him. Can you imagine if he had just do whatever he wanted and there was
Yes.
no repercussions at all?
Yes. I mean, that's why it's still just unfathomable. If this is true, how could he have murdered that many women with people seeing him?
Because we see sometimes as a society what we want to see.
Yes.
And if you Google Don, which I didn't when we first, like, I didn't even know who he was when I first started reading and
Mhm.
going into this. And then even at the end of the first reading, you told me who he was. I didn't know. And then I Googled him right before our second podcast. Just, I want to see, what does this man look like? Nice looking gentleman,
Mhm.
very
Yeah.
well kept, very controlled, hair done, dressed nicely.
Oh, yes. He was always clean shaven. His hair was always completely neat. His clothes were always neat. He was just very well put together.
Never would have thought it ever.
Nope.
And that is how so many people get away with it. And why people aren't believed is because, well, look at them. There's no
Mhm.
way.
Yes, definitely.
Mhm. Now, whenever we are talking about you were brave enough to ask for help.
Mhm.
I want everyone listening that if you're in this situation, if you think, and I know this may sound silly, but if you think this just doesn't feel right, because a lot of times, whenever, just like I was telling you, the young person I was talking to the other day, she didn't even realize, like, she had kind of been isolated.
Mhm.
Then her husband had started putting that she didn't realize these steps in which it was going.
Correct.
Discernment. I love that word that you use, discernment.
Mhm.
And it's a very gradual thing.
It is.
So if you ever think that this isn't right, I'm just not sure about this, um, make sure you are asking for help. Call a hotline. If you don't feel comfortable, talking to a friend about it, call a hotline. Ask them. They will be willing to help you.
Yes. And there is no shame. There is no shame. And that's another thing. Society has just, there's always this shame about it. There is no shame.
Blame the victim.
Yes, exactly. And that's what we have done. And it's sad. It's very sad.
Absolutely, it's sad. Um, and some of the strongest women I know, I mean, I think back to the moment when I still think how silly it was for me to telling the person I worked with, just leave. Can you imagine the strength it takes to stay in that kind of environment?
Yes. I mean, yeah.
I mean, I was the
Yeah.
weak one. I was just like, leave. I'm weak.
Mhm.
I'm not putting up with that. But the amount of, I knew for a fact, I do know that that lady had a child with that man.
Mhm.
So a lot of times people do it because they just don't, how are you going to get your child away?
Right.
Um, Sometimes it's economic. Sometimes it is, you know, just psychological. You have been beat down to the point where you have no self-esteem and self-worth.
Mhm.
And to me that's the hardest to see, because when I read people, I always say I wish they could see in themselves what I see in them.
Yes.
Because I'm tapping your energy. I don't see this shell that
No.
people put out to society. I'm like in there. I'm in your soul. Like, what you
Yeah.
got on in here? Everyone, everyone has the ability to be this beautiful person. And it's, these women I've seen that have been through some horrific situations that have the kindest, most beautiful, caring hearts you can
Yes.
imagine.
Mhm.
And what a detriment it is to our society that they're not allowed to express it.
And shine.
Right. If everyone could let their light shine and be who they are at a core soul level. And I do want to also tap back. I did it to when you were here the other night with Don. I was like, why was he so mean? And that's how whenever I'm doing readings, I get multiple spirits. Because when yes, I have had other domestic violence victims step up. I have had actual murderers step up, and I have read them. I'll be like, why were you like that? And then we will kind of take a step back to where, and so now, yes, there is no excuse. I am absolutely not making any excuses.
No.
We are responsible for our own behavior. And just like you can have people, Don's children all turned out differently.
Yes.
Some
They
of them
did.
turned out, probably, I don't know them, some of them turned out to be like his stepdaughter, I mean his daughter Lucy.
Mhm.
That girl turned, I mean, look how strong she is.
Yes.
Good
She's
for
always
her.
been a beautiful, beautiful light. I've always loved her.
Whereas probably some of his other children turned out differently.
Yep.
So we can, you can have people in the same environment and they're going to turn out differently. So I do want to say that I'm not excusing anyone's behavior, especially Don's.
Mm-mm.
But I was like, why, what happened? And instantly he took me back to some things that had happened in his childhood.
Okay.
And just that feeling of a child of being not just lost and desolate, hopeless. That's the feelings I was getting off of him as a child.
Mhm.
And now, is that an excuse to behave the way he did? Absolutely not. I'm not saying that at all.
Nope.
But what I am saying is that even Don, at some point in his life, could have made the choice to step into his soul's beauty
Mhm.
and
Yes,
become a good person.
correct.
It
The
was
choice.
his choice.
Yep.
A lot of people will come to me and they're like, why, they would just struggle with why they were treated a certain way by a spouse or by a parent. I'm very much on free will. And if someone's free will is to act like a demented asshole, then that's their free will. Excuse my French, anyone. But if that's their free will, then that's their free will.
Mhm.
Is it right? No.
Nope.
But even Don, as horrific of a person as he was on this earth, and the path of destruction he left is long and wide.
Mhm.
At some point, he had the ability to make the choice to step into his soul's beauty.
Yes.
And it's people's soul's beauty that I see when I read them. And it's like,
Yes.
if they can see the power in that and the beauty that it offers this world, I would do that for everyone.
Oh, I know. And I think that's with my mom. She always seen the beauty and the good in people.
She really did. And we talked about that when I read your mom, like before you told me that's what she was like.
Mhm.
I said, you just confirmed, it's like your mom, she was just such a beautiful soul. And she could, part of it in the beginning, like even when Dawn was, I would say, grooming her or, kind of getting her ready to, be
Mhm.
dependent on him, she saw the beauty in him.
She did.
She knew some of the things that he was doing weren't right, but she saw the beauty in him. And a lot of women do this. They just think that if they love their partner enough, if they can change them, they can help them because you can see the beauty in them.
Yes.
But it's like you said earlier, Marie, that if people don't make that choice on their own, then
Mm-mm.
not going to
Nope.
work.
Nope, it's not.
So do you have any parting words before we close down today?
I just want people to know that you are worthy and you are enough and you are beautiful, whether you're a man or woman.
Absolutely.
Please find and search for your self-worth and love yourself.
Absolutely. Love yourself enough to put your needs first.
Yes, value you.
Yes. And it's very difficult. I understand a lot of us did not grow up in households where we were valued.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
so when we weren't taught as we were young to value ourselves, and it takes a long time to find it as we get older.
It's
So
time to break the cycle.
it is absolutely time to break the cycle. You're a beautiful human, a beautiful, beautiful human. And that's what I say. If I could just get everyone to see the beauty in them that I
Mhm.
see and express it in this world, it would be a beautiful
Yes,
place.
it would.
Thank you, Marie, for being here again. Um, I'm not sure what the next step for us is going to be. If we are going to have Marie on a live event, I'm not sure that'll probably be maybe in February we can do that.
We might be able to fit that in.
And we'll have her live and people can ask them their questions live
Mhm.
and we'll be there to answer them. If anyone has any kind of concerns, if you think that your situation is headed in a area, even if you just have questions, and I know it's silly, you think you're always going to recognize domestic violence. Not always.
Mm-mm.
If it's just an inkling and you're like, I'm not sure. And sometimes we are afraid, we don't want to discuss it with our family members because we don't want them to think badly of our spouse
Mhm.
or our partner. Call the Domestic Violence Hotline. It is 800-799-7233. That number will also be in the verbiage of this podcast, whether you're watching it on YouTube or listening to it on a podcast outlet. I want to thank everyone for being here today. And I especially want to thank Marie for being brave and joining me on this journey.
Love it.
Y'all have a great day.